Welcome back to Kevin Toll Reads. I hope you're doing well. It is time for Saturday Shorts, and we are talking The Savage Tales of Solomon Kane. I read 4 tales in the Adventures of Solomon Kane, and so I want to talk to you about them. I know a lot of people liked kind of this real loose video I did last Saturday, so I'm going to kind of stick with it. Before we get started, I want to give you a little bit of insight about this character and Howard. And so Solomon Kane, the Puritan adventurer, there's actually a 2009 adaptation on YouTube that I found. I haven't watched it, but it's kind of like a movie adaptation about this character. Interesting. Howard wrote Solomon Kane as kind of this gothic avenger years before superheroes like Batman and the Punisher came to fruition. Howard was 22 when Red Shadows appeared in Weird Tales magazine. Kane's adventures often blur the line between historical adventure and kind of a gothic horror element. It's kind of a hallmark of Howard's style when writing these. And the character in Longa, he's a shaman from the story Red Shadows. He actually reappears later in some of the Kane stories, as Howard liked to weave recurring characters in some of his stories. And so, without further ado, we're going to dive right in and talk about the stories I read for this episode of Saturday Shorts. And so, Skulls in the Stars was first published in 1928. A lot of these stories were published in the late 1920s. Besides one. One was actually published after Howard's passing. We'll get to that. But these tales are excellent. Skull and Stars was the first one in my Del Rey omnibus collection of the Savage Tales of Solomon Kane. I cannot recommend these Del Rey books enough, especially the 3 I have for Conan. I have others that I'm wanting to get, whether it's Call, El Barak, there's a horror stories one. I mean, there's 7 or 8 different ones, and I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for them. They're fantastic. I don't find them out used hardly at all. I did see one recently, but I already had it. But I definitely will spend the money. I mean, for $17 or something like that on Amazon, it's definitely worth what you get out of these things. They're incredible, and I talked about that on some of my Conan reviews. But I digress. Let's jump right back in and talk about this. So, Skulls in the Stars is the first story I read. The summary, where we meet Solomon Kane. He is on his way to Torkertown. He's talking to a young kid, and there's 2 roads he can take from where he is to the town. One is a longer road. It goes around or about through a swamp, and the direct road goes right through a moor. And the townspeople are trying to talk him off of taking the moor road. They want him to take the swamp road. People of the town won't tell Solomon Kane why he needs to take the longer swamp road, and they're being very shady about it. They don't really want to talk about it. They're very fearful. And Kane ends up taking the moor road to find the source of why no one will really give him insight of what's going on. And he uncovers a lot of different things. The story kind of follows, him as he travels through this and what he uncovers and kind of these apparitions that come throughout and why. And you kind of get that. You kind of figure out what's going on. And there's a nice little conclusion. What makes it a good story? I liked kind of the atmospheric vibe to it. Very Lovecraftian. There was a lot of eeriness to everything. There's definitely some mystique that ends up, you find out the why. You find out the reason for everything, and it's not as mysterious as what one may think at first, but there's definitely some wrongs that need to be there needs to be retribution for, and that's a huge kind of theme when it comes to Solomon Kane and these adventures. He is out for justice and retribution, and that definitely comes to fruition in this story. There is one excerpt that I thought was really indicative of the writing. It said, "These things be deeds of some power of evil. The lords of darkness have laid a curse upon the country. A strong man is needed to combat Satan and his might. Therefore I go, who have defied him many a time." And I thought that was a really, really good one. In terms of rating overall, I give this a 3.5. It had some interesting elements, but it was a pretty short tale, and it really wasn't very satisfying for me. It was just okay. It was interesting. I liked the atmosphere. I liked some of the prose. Definitely, it was an interesting introduction to Solomon Kane. I wish some of the other stories would have been the first stories I read. Nevertheless, though, it was interesting, and it definitely gets better as I go throughout the other three stories. And so that is my take on Skulls in the Stars. And so now let's talk about The Right Hand of Doom. And so The Right Hand of Doom, this is the one that was actually published after Howard's death in 1968. This summary, it's a very short story as well, but this summary of this one is Kane is in Torkertown, and he discovers that there is a sorcerer that's being executed, and he's at a bar listening to a man by the name of John Ridley, talk about it and talk ill of this necromancer named Roger Simeon, who's going to be executed or was executed recently. And so, yes, there's very strange things that happen after that. And it's hard really to get into a lot of the weeds. This is like a 3 or 4 page short story, so I don't really want to say more than that. But after the execution, some strange things happen that involve Solomon Kane and Mr. John Ridley, and I'll leave it at that. What makes it a really good short story is it's unlike some of the longer tales. Red Shadows is one of the longer ones I read in this 4. It has its own kind of short but grim and atmospheric prose that really draws you in, and it leaves open like this cliffhanger, like something is going to happen that's not right, and when it does, it makes for a very satisfying conclusion to the story. The story, I did some research on this one, and the story is often compared to Poe's kind of macabre type tales. M.R. James's Ghost Stories is another comparison, and I think it's really indicative because Howard's writing in this one really heavily reminded me of Lovecraft in this one. I don't know why, but it really just kind of resonated with me. It definitely has a different prose and effect than what I would say from his Conan tales, and I will say that. In terms of rating overall in this one, I give it a 4.1. I think it is a very interesting story. I really enjoyed it. I thought it had a lot of what I was looking for, and it was very quick. And normally with quicker short stories, I don't get enough meat or conflict or character development or dynamics to really grab my attention, but this one absolutely did, and I really enjoyed it. 4.1, really solid. Story number 3 is Red Shadows, and it is the longest of all 4 of the tales by quite a bit. It was published in Weird Tales magazine in 1928. This is actually the debut story for Solomon Kane, the Puritan adventurer. And yeah, I wish I kind of would have done a little more research ahead of time and read this one first, because I think it would have gave me a different kind of perspective on some of the others. But with all that being said, let's dive right in and talk about a summary of this, which is where it begins in the mountains of France, where Kane discovers a dying girl, and he's with this dying girl who's been brutally attacked and is dying, and her last kind of breath, she begs for justice. And that really kind of strikes a tuning fork when it comes to Solomon Kane, and he swears to an oath to avenge her. And that vow leads him not only in France and Europe, but across into the wilds of Africa. He goes chasing a man after a confrontation goes awry. When he finds the people responsible in Europe, that kind of confrontation goes awry, especially with the man known as Le Loup, or aka the Wolf. And he ends up chasing this character all the way to Africa. And when he does meet up again with this kind of mercenary Le Loup, he's around a band of Aborigines and in Africa, and they're battling kind of both human depravity and kind of supernatural forces, kind of black magic. And so that's kind of the summary of this. What makes it a good short story is, one, is the length was really, really right in that sweet spot. It's about 40 odd pages, I would say, maybe 50. And so it's right in that where you get plenty of conflict, multiple plot threads. You get characters that really kind of are flushed out enough to where you kind of either like or dislike them. So you really create some really good emotions with reading the short story. Um, Going from France to Africa, chasing this man, all for a dying girl that he really didn't know anything about or had no ties to, just kind of really showcases the character and the moral compass of Solomon Kane. And so I thought that was really interesting. I liked Leloup, aka the Wolf. He is a very strong antagonist, and I like some of the sword play that happens. They talk about, their swords, the rapiers, which I didn't know was another name for a sword, and I thought that was really interesting. It really also showcases Kane's kind of level of determination, strength of mind, the willpower to see something after making an oath to someone you don't even have any ties to, that you see it through beyond continents. And so I thought it was really interesting. I really liked Howard's viewpoint of Africa in the 1920s. I thought that was really interesting as well. There's a lot of great themes, whether fate or duty, that are kind of expressed here as well. There's one excerpt that I thought was interesting. It was from Solomon Kane, and it said, "I admire your courage. I intend to return to my own people when I have slain you." And that was what he was saying to Loop. And I thought that was really interesting. Rating and overall, I give this one a 4.4. Is my favorite of all four of the short stories I read from Solomon Kane. It's definitely more robust. I like the multiple conflicts and plot threads, the characters, the protagonist, or the antagonist, Leloup. He is an interesting one. And you also get to see a chance to really see Solomon Kane as a warrior in stressful situations, magical, and like the black magic that is done in this story, especially from the character I mentioned earlier, Nolonga, in his black magic, an interesting character in and of itself. And so my last short story that I read in these tales is Rattle of Bones. This was published in Weird Tales in 1929. This was actually Howard's second entry into the Tales of Solomon Kane. The summary of this one, it's another short tale. Kane is traveling through the Black Forest in Germany, where he encounters Gaston the Butcher, a fellow swordsman. The two decide basically to, stay the night and lodge at a mysterious kind of inn, and the atmosphere quickly kind of turns into sinister. Kane is very on guard about Gaston. Plus, he doesn't like how the innkeeper greets them, especially when he shows them to their room. Kane wants them to find a bar to put across the door so he can sleep, even though he says he's a light sleeper, but he doesn't want to be stabbed in the back, and he doesn't trust the innkeeper. But secretly, he's also saying, I don't trust Gaston either, even though we're going to share a room. And so what kind of follows is a tale of kind of like double crosses. You have evil, and you have kind of a dun-da-da-da moment at the end, kind of thing. And I thought it was very sinister and had some great elements. What makes it good? It's quick. It's one of the shorter tales as well out of the four, but it's really done really well. It drew me in, especially the innkeeper and Gaston as antagonist really drew me into the story a lot, because I think Gaston was on the surface was going to be someone that was going to double cross him, and I don't think that was trying to be hidden. I don't think that was kind of a twist. I think that was just a known thing, and you were just waiting for it to happen. So there's that. I think the innkeeper definitely, even though he seems ordinary as a host and innkeeper, you definitely kind of sense that something may be off there. The story has almost a claustrophobic setting as well. You have these two guys, in Gaston and Solomon Kane, and are in this room, and it seems to have this feeling of claustrophobia in the story. I don't know what it was, but it really reminded me, and I had that kind of emotion when I was reading it. There was one excerpt that I thought was interesting as well, and it was from Solomon Kane. It said, "I had little thought that I should fear a man with whom I had broken bread." And that was definitely indicative of his kind of thought process around Gaston the Butcher. In terms of rating and overall, I gave it a 4.2. It's a decent short story, has enough of conflict and twists, double crosses to make it interesting, all the while where it's very tightly written. I wanted to say this as well. Most of these stories you can find online through either Project Gutenberg or you can find them on YouTube where they have audible readings on YouTube of these stories. And so there is a decent amount of actually YouTube content dedicated to Solomon Kane. And so, yeah, I found a lot out there. A lot of the pictures that I'm going to put in the video I found from there as well. In terms of, overall, when it comes to the adventures of Solomon Kane, if you're looking for, more enjoyment, if you like Robert E. Howard and you're wanting to delve into another character, I think this is an interesting one to take on. I don't think it'll be a character that everyone will be like over the moon about. It's definitely not Conan. Let's just be honest with you all. Conan is definitely a tier above here, but there's some interest here. I liked some of the stories. I know in looking through the contents, there's some tales that are a little longer in here as well, so I'm interested in getting to those to see if I have kind of the same experience I had with Red Shadows. But yeah, if you're looking for Conan, this is definitely not Conan, but it's definitely an interesting character, and I like the dynamics of it. It gives you a different twist, and it definitely showcases Robert E. Howard, who was very, very young when he wrote these. So yeah, I'm really interested. I'm glad I read these. I'm definitely going to read some more and do some reviews on the channel as well down the road. But yeah, that's my take on those 4 tales of Solomon Kane. I hope you enjoy this. Hope you're having a great Saturday, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Thanks.